All right. So tonight at San Francisco DUG, we welcome Juanita George. Juanita works at NFCU and is an accessibility guidelines expert. And she will be speaking to us tonight about the latest WCAG, is how you say it, right? 3.0.
WCAG, WCAG, many names, same thing.
That's great. Yeah, I like the WCAG, how you say it, because it's a lot easier than WCAG every time. All right. And yeah, so welcome, Juanita. And with that, let you go ahead and share your screen. I will stop sharing.
All right, just give me a second to pull the presentation up. Oh, there we are. It is sharing. Okay. And I'm going to press this little button here. All right. And so, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Today, we're going to go over what WCAG 3.0 is, how it works, some of the content that the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group is working on, and how you can prepare. We already sort of did this, so I guess we can talk a little bit about me. I joined NFCU, which is Navy Federal Credit Union, in 2020. Currently manage their digital accessibility program, and I represent Navy Federal on the accessibility guidelines and ARIA working groups at the W3C. If you see a JD behind my name, it's true. I am an attorney licensed in Maryland, but nothing I say today is legal advice. Also, a couple of other caveats. What's contained in here does not represent the views of W3C or AGWIG, nor does it reflect the opinions of my employer. Have to say that. All right, so now moving on to what WCAG 3.0 is and how it compares to WCAG 2.x standards. When we talk about WCAG 2.x, what we're referring to is WCAG 2.2, 2.1, and 2.0. So those are the standards that are around today. 2.2 is expected to be published in, we're saying, early 2023 right now. It's a little bit, it's moved a couple of times. So, but we're thinking 2023. So first, what is WCAG 3.0? It's the successor to WCAG 2.2, which I, again, said it was going to be released in early 2023. And it's a complete reinvention of the guidelines, and it supports a broad range of functional needs. So it's meant to really include users with disabilities in the conversation, and really meant to overhaul and fix a lot of the things that were difficult about the 2.x series, like it being difficult, for instance, for folks to get started. It includes additional tests and scoring mechanisms. So it's not just that pass-fail, you comply or don't comply, that was the feature in WCAG 2.x. It incorporates and partially extends the user accessibility, the user agent accessibility guidelines. So that's, for like web browsers and such, 2.0, and ATAG, which is the authoring tool accessibility guidelines, 2.0 as well. It's also not backwards compatible with WCAG 2.x. So it's completely different. So even though it's not backwards compatible, meaning that you can't make something that's similarly like accessible in 2.2, for instance, and then have it completely translate to 3.0, it's still complementary. So here's the latest on where the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group is with WCAG 3.0. The new standards are in development. So whatever you see online and such, it is all draft content. Expect it to change. This is all part of the process, and we're rediscovering and discovering just different ways of doing things. And with that, the available drafts are just that, drafts. Review them and provide input. We need your feedback. The new version of guidelines we're meant to, one of the goals of the project was to get guidance from the entire world and to open up the floor so that we're really getting feedback from the community. So if you have taken a look and want to provide feedback, submit a GitHub issue, and I have the link there. So it may take 4 or more years. Oh, can someone post the links here? Oh, yeah. That's just fine. I can do that. It may take 4 more years to get a more final draft. So input is being sought, again, as I said, from the whole world, the whole community, and it's going to change. So don't cite it just yet. If you want to test things out and offer your own perspective, that's okay. But wait till after it's published as guidance to cite it as guidance. Know that everything we're about to discuss today may change drastically. Before the new standards are finalized. So anything we talk about at all, even the levels, the very structure of the standards may change. So, and if you have feedback, create a GitHub issue. We're really looking for everybody to provide input and really be part of the conversation.
I can't see the GitHub link. Can you put it up in the chat?
Oh, it should. Oh, oops. Sorry about that. I sent that to one person and not everyone.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. So what are the differences between 2.x and 3.0? Oh, so the release is coming in 2023 is the first release of, oh, no. So Kathy, the release that's coming in 2023 is actually 2.2. There might be another published working draft coming out, but that is just another working draft. It's not the final version or anywhere near the final. The one that what we're thinking about is going to come out in the next 4 years is going to be a more final version. But between now and then, there's going to be a number of working drafts. So there are a lot of key differences for now between 2.x and 3.0. For 2.x, tests and overall conformance are pass-fail. As you know, it's challenging to update, so updates come every few years. If that, it's organized under 4 principles with 13 guidelines and 78 testable success criteria. And it has a narrower scope, so it applies to websites, digital content, etc. WCAG 3.0 has a more flexible conformance model. So it's going to feature a model that makes it easier for people to get started with digital accessibility. It will be more frequently updated. There will be an increase likely in a number of standards. Also, it will have a broader scope and a greater focus on users. So if you haven't read the guidance or understanding document for at least the WCAG 2.x series, then I really recommend that you do so you can get familiar with the existing standards and be ready for when the new ones come out. While the new standard should be written in a more accessible way, it still may be technical in some places. So getting the hang of reading standards now will help you a lot later. So here is a little bit of a, I guess, table comparing WCAG 2.x features to WCAG 3.0 features. So as you can see, the POR isn't here anymore. We don't have those 4 principles, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Those exist in WCAG 2.x, but will likely not be used in WCAG 3.0 to structure content for now. So right now we have guidelines which map to guidelines of WCAG 3.0, success criteria, which is the equivalent to outcomes. So outcomes are now the testable basically the result of actions that people take to make accessible content. Then you have techniques or failures. That's the how to make content accessible. That is maps to methods in WCAG 3.0. And then you have the understanding documents, which will now be guideline how-tos and will be written in a little bit more approachable language. So there's a little less ambiguity. So the new guidance structure is based off of 12 months of research by academic partners and members of the Silver Task Force. And the Silver Task Force recommended important improvements, including multiple ways to measure conformance, flexible maintenance and extensibility, availability in multiple formats, it being technology neutral, readable, facilitating adoption into law, and motivates organizations to go beyond minimal accessibility. We want organizations to, really take this in stride. So here are the project goals of WCAG 3.0. It's to include people with disabilities in the conversation and to enable global feedback. Right now, GitHub is being used for that. To create standards also that are user-oriented. So that's where the functional needs and functional categories come from. And preserve organizations' investment in training, tooling, and knowledge. So becoming compliant with the WCAG 2.x standards will help you become compliant with WCAG 3.0. So don't wait for 3.0 to come to become compliant. It'll improve testing and reduce the burden of accessibility supported so that it doesn't only fall on authors. So WCAG 2.x focus a lot on things authors can do to make things accessible. And so this will hopefully spread that load a little bit. So what falls within the scope of WCAG 3? So it's going to be a bit more expansive, and it's going to include things like desktop apps, mobile apps, authoring tools, user agents. So those are like web browsers, web applications, Internet of Things devices, such as wearables, virtual and augmented reality, and operating systems. So with WCAG 3.0, you'll see section status labels that indicate sort of the maturity of content. So where it is in the process, like how much has it been vetted, and how likely is it to be around in future drafts. So those section labels include things like placeholder, that's temporary content that showcases the kind of content or section to expect within the document. All of that's going to be replaced at one point. Exploratory, so the working group with this type of content is exploring what direction to take with the section, and the content in there is not refined, and details may be missing. So folks can provide input about that to help shape the future of that. There's developing, which is a rough agreement on what's needed for the section by the working group, although not all high-level concerns have been settled. Details have been filled out, but have to be worked out. And then you have refining. So that's when consensus has been reached on the section and is ready for broad public review and experimental adoption. And then you have mature content, which is believed to be ready for recommendation. So that's more the final level of content maturity. So just to help you understand what the guidelines mean, whether you're reading in 2.x or 3.0, let's take a look at some of the languages used throughout the document. You have content that's labeled as normative, but that does kind of sound jargony. So what they really mean when they use normative and refer to normative content is that it's just content that's required. So the key terms to look out for to try to figure out if something is normative or required are the words must and must not. When content is labeled as non-normative, what they're really saying is that it's informational. So you really ought to do it, but it's not required in the same way that normative content is. The terms that they use with this kind of content include not recommended or recommended, should or should not. So just keep that in mind as you read through the standards. So now let's go over how the new guidelines will be structured. So what's included in the new guidelines? You have things like the guidelines themselves, WCAG 3.0. Then you have the WCAG 3.0 explainer, sort of a guide to the new standard. That's what that document is. It's written in a pretty accessible way to help explain what the new standard features. You have guideline how-tos, which are plain language how-tos that provide specific info about how to meet the standard. The current ones that you can see actually feature information for developers and for designers and such. So they're really great. I would take a look. Then you have the outcomes, the methods, functional categories, things called critical errors, and outcome ratings. And so we're going to go over each of those. So first, you have the main document, which includes 6 draft guidelines. So if you wonder where all the guidelines are in the first public working draft, they're just drafts to show you the kinds of content that WCAG 3.0 will have. It shows the new structure of the standard, including introducing plain language summaries, outcome details and methods, functional categories, the outcome supports, critical errors, and rubrics for scoring. Those rubrics are not in the current editor's draft. So there are editor's drafts and there are public working drafts. And the editor's draft has all the latest content. The public working draft is the latest published content, so a rubric is a table basically, which you can, with different levels of conformance that you can use to measure your content and how accessible it is, and how well it meets the standard. So in the first public working draft, they had different scoring mechanisms for each outcome, and they had different categories of conformance. So they had rubrics for scoring. That isn't kind of like A, AA, and AAA, but only more granular in how things are scored. So it was very content specific. So let's say you had you were looking at 1.1.1, for instance, non-text content, and you wanted to see if your alt text, the way you use alt text and whether or not it's present and such, whether you met that standard adequately. You would have a rubric that would help you measure your content and ensure that you had the right kind of alt text that was sufficient to meet the standard, sufficiently meaningful and such. That decorative content did not have alt text, so that it wasn't read out to assistive technology, and that the alt attribute, for instance, was present in all HTML elements. So, they had different rubrics for scoring different kinds of content, and it was different for each of the standards. Does that make sense? Yes. It would in the end give you a percentage score. And so the first public working draft had a scoring mechanism that basically had you weigh different different kinds of success criteria, which different kinds of outcomes, and then come out with a full score, which would then place you in a particular level. Yeah, that is actually for Carol's question. That is going to be it. That is in the first public working draft. You can actually see the rubric in an example. And then basically you can gather from there how you'd use it in your content, because it's pretty specific. Actually, I can pull it up if you want to see one. I can do that afterward. So also it features iconography and a new design to help improve readability as well. So, it's meant to be a bit more readable than the previous standards. So then you have the WCAG 3.0 explainer, which explains the goals for WCAG 3, including the goal for inclusion and inclusivity, for content to be written in plain language, and to offer a better conformance model. And it provides an explanation of how the guidelines, outcomes, and methods relate to one another. It describes, it delves into functional needs and functional categories. So those are the needs of users, and then the categories of users that we're talking about. and then describes the conformance levels. It also provides guidance on how organizations can select representative samples. So that section is being built out a little bit. Yeah. So it is similar to the rubrics used, to Tara's point, to the rubrics used in education. So whether or not you met the expectation that was given there. So in the first public working draft, there were 6 guidelines that were introduced that will be part of WCAG 3. These are just examples of the kinds of standards that you'll see. So you'll have text alternatives, which was migrated from 2.x. Clear words, which is a completely new guideline. So they want to show it as an example of a new guideline that may come into future drafts. And that guideline was based off of another document that was created by the accessibility guidelines working group called Making Content Usable, which I'll provide a link to later on. And then you also have captions, which adapts WCAG 2.x to emerging tech, such as web virtual reality. So I recommend everybody take a look. Structured content, which is a migration and merging of several previously unrelated WCAG 2.0 success criteria. And then you have visual contrast of text. So that's a migration of WCAG of a WCAG 2 success criterion with substantial changes to update it. And then error prevention, a migration of WCAG of a WCAG 2.0 success criterion with substantial changes as well. So these guidelines are just early draft examples of what WCAG 3 could look like and are meant to show more of the structure of the content rather than actually be the definitive guidelines that folks will follow now. So that's why I don't cite it. So then you have guideline how-tos, which are expected to replace the understanding documents. They leverage tabs to organize information in an understandable way. These are about to be redesigned too, so they're going to change, but hopefully they made it a little bit more user-friendly. They also ensure that large blocks of text are broken out into headings and lists for accessibility and readability. They're written in plain language and avoid technical jargon, and they include planning, designing, and development guidance, and also provide examples and resources. So then you have outcomes, which are, yes, I did catch that typo as I was reading it. Thank you. Then you have outcomes, which are expected to be the new success criteria. And each guideline contains multiple outcomes. And so outcomes are designed to be the result of actions taken to reduce or eliminate barriers to access. So they're the success criteria written in a way that highlights the expected benefits to the user. So that's to make the guidelines more user-focused, because that's really what WCAG and what accessibility is all about, our users. And they're meant to be a form of flexible and expansive guidance based on the needs of people with disabilities. They're designed to be used by developers, testers, and technical experts. And they're written as testable criteria to include information about how to score them, similar to, but not the same as exactly success criteria and those understanding documents as well. So then you have outcome ratings, which are essentially rubrics for measuring an outcome right now. That is going to change likely with our conformance discussions, as I'll show you later. Rubrics and outcome ratings were in the first published working draft, and they were included with each of the guidelines as an example. So if you pull up the current public working draft, you can still see them there, but they're not in the editor's draft. And they may not be in future drafts depending on where we land with conformance. And that's when I'm saying we, I refer to everybody here because anybody can actually contribute to this conversation. So methods are like techniques and failures under WCAG 2.x and will likely include detailed information, which can either be technology specific or agnostic, that tells someone how to meet an outcome and includes testing and scoring information. There are multiple outcomes under guidelines, and there will be multiple methods under outcomes. So in the most recent editor's draft, it was noted that the method structure was being revised a little bit to more closely align with ACT rules. So that's the group that's building out testing, testing methods and such for the WCAG, to reduce ambiguity in testing. So then you have functional categories. So this is really part of yes, that is one of the goals is to provide guidelines that help address the needs of users with who are neurodiverse or who have folks with cognitive disabilities as well. So it's meant to address a wider range of people of disability. So these functional needs are grouped into functional categories. And as you can see here, those are the functional categories that are going to be addressed in the new standards. But like everything else in WCAG 3.0, it's subject to change. But here's the initial set of functional categories. And as you can see, cognitive and sensory intersections and such have been included as well. Then you have what's called critical errors. Critical errors are accessibility problems that will stop a user from being able to complete a process. So these include items that stop a user from being able to complete a task if it exists anywhere in the view. So that's, for example, flashing content could cause somebody to have a seizure. Anytime that there's content that flashes more than 3 times per second, that renders the page completely unusable, because not even people who have photosensitive epilepsy always know that they have photosensitive epilepsy until it's triggered. There's also keyboard traps. Folks who use keyboards to navigate might get stuck, and then they can't leave or go anywhere, so it renders the whole site unusable. And then audio with no pause. Folks using screen readers can't stop. If they can't stop the audio, it will interfere with their screen reader interaction and that audio interface that the screen reader creates for the person that won't exist, because they won't be able to hear and distinguish between what their screen reader is saying and between what the audio is saying, most likely, and it will render the whole page useless. Also, errors that are located within a process means the process cannot be completed. So, for example, like a submit button that doesn't work or isn't in a tab order, that's a complete barrier for the user flow. The user can't submit their form or get to the next stage in the process. So it also includes errors that are aggregated within a view or across a process that cause failure. So, like confusing, ambiguous language, really hard to navigation. I mean, just really things that are really not friendly to users might also trigger a critical error. There's also a section for user-generated content. User-generated content is really basically, this is meant for platforms that are designed to collect user content, like social media, blogs, Instagram, for instance, is one form where they're collecting a lot of images from users, and the content moderator, which would be Instagram in this case, or I guess it's now owned by Meta, maybe, I forget. These companies are all getting bought by different companies. But yeah, so anyways, they can't necessarily control the accessibility of all that content that appears on their page. Many of the WCAG 3.0 guidelines are expected to apply to this content, and where user-generated content specific requirement is needed. So something like making the interface for posting an image to Instagram accessible, it would be included in future drafts. The web content publisher should identify all locations as user-generated content and perform an accessibility and analysis of each. That is currently in the working draft, and WCAG 3.0 is expected to identify a minimum conformance level for user-generated content in future drafts, because you have that problem of a lot of users, sometimes, millions upon millions or hundreds of millions of users adding content. So this is a chart showing how guidelines and outcomes and methods and guideline how-tos and other WCAG guidelines relate to each other. The guidelines is at the top, and below is an arrow pointing to outcomes, and below outcomes is an arrow pointing to methods, showing the hierarchy where guidelines is at the top, outcomes is under guidelines, and methods is under outcomes, showing that hierarchical relationship between the content. Off to the side, there's an arrow pointing off to the right-hand side where you have guideline how-tos and other WCAG guidance, showing that these sit outside of the main hierarchy, but still are important to complying with the overall WCAG 3.0 content. So just describing that in a little bit more detail, because not a great designer, but here's how everything we discussed works together. And those guidelines are at the top level because we don't have the principles currently in WCAG 3.0. The outcomes are under each guideline, and then you have the methods which help you reach the outcomes. And then you have the supplemental guidance like the guideline how-tos, which are like the understanding documents in WCAG 2.x, and other W3C guidance, which I'll show later. There's a lot of great things on W3C's site, and I encourage everybody to take a look. All right, so now we're going to talk about conformance and testing. And again, all of this is very draft content, so I would definitely expect it to change, but here are some of the conversations that folks are having. And if you want to contribute to the discussion in the next public working draft, or even just taking a look at the editor's drafts, which are publicly available, please do. So when we talk about conformance, it's exploratory, as I mentioned earlier. You have those different section headings, and exploratory is that very, very rough draft. It's just above placeholder, so it's not placeholder content. There's things that are written there, but it's very, very rough. So it's really just conversation items right now. So that's when you put exploratory there, that's what that means. It's not quite lorem ipsum. It's a little bit more fleshed out. It's more of a proposal, right? So if we were going to tackle this issue, here's one way to do it, but it's not the only way. Maybe it's not the best way. It's out there for input. So when we talk about conformance, what are we really talking about? Is conformance just taking everything as a whole? So WCAG 3.0 tries to reduce some of that ambiguity by providing definitions for different scopes of conformance. Those include things like items, which are the smallest testable unit. Those might be like interactive components like drop downs, a link, or a media player. They may be also pieces of content, such as a word, phrase, icon, or image. Then you have views, which include all content visually and programmatically, so that means in the code, available without a substantive change. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of jargon in the standards. That's why we're there's a lot of effort to try to write these in a more accessible way. So the views are similar to web pages in WCAG 2.x, but they're not restricted to content meeting that definition. So it's meant to apply to more content, like a screen in a mobile app. User process, so that's like a series of user actions that have distinct interactive views and items that support those interactions, where each of those actions are required to complete an activity. So that means more, like adding an item to a shopping cart So the user process may include a subset of items in a view or group of views. So you can actually have multiple pages when you add something to a shopping cart and then move through the checkout process. But that's the whole thing together is a user process, because you're, taking the action of making a purchase. Then you have the aggregate, which is a combination of items, views, and user processes that make up a set of web pages, website, application, etc. So something I recommend is, if you're not sure, if you're like, oh gosh, I have this huge application and I don't know where to start testing, look at the WCAG EM. So EM stands for evaluation methodology. It provides a ton of helpful info about how to, start your audit, like how to define performance scope and such. That's also contained a little bit in the explainer, but they really delve into detail about it in WCAG EM. Oh yeah, definitely. I can go over sort of some of the conversations that we're having about more accepted content versus what's being more discussed among folks. I would probably say that a lot of it is up in the air. Even the scope of it may be up in the air. There's a lot of conversation happening. We're trying to, a lot of folks are putting a lot of great effort into it. And so, I don't think there's content that's further along the maturity curve than other content, but it's all subject to change. It's in the very early stages right now. So right now, what's generally accepted that there are going to be 3 levels of conformance. The names of that may change. So there's going to be, right now they're using bronze, silver, and gold, but there may be different names in the future. The general directions use a lower minimum level of conformance, which right here is called bronze, and a second level, which is expected to replace WCAG 2.0 and AA. And then a higher level that organizations are encouraged to strive for. There's also talk about building ways into the conformance model to encourage organizations to go further and really mature their accessibility programs. So that's going to be noted in some of the conformance models we're going to discuss today. So this is other exploratory content, and we have test types and test requirements. So what's currently in WCAG 2.0 are test types. So what's been organized and is currently in 2.0 are 2 different test types as a starting point to determine how those tests be moved into methods and further expanded to take more user needs into consideration. Those include computational tests. So those are tests that will not vary based on the tester or approach. Examples include, testing whether or not certain properties exist in a content, or if they match a value specified by a requirement. So the easiest way to think about a computational test is color contrast. Content that text content has to meet a 4:5:1 ratio between the foreground and the background if you're talking about text, normal size text. And if you're talking about larger texts, you can meet a slightly lower contrast ratio of 3:1. Then you have qualitative tests. So those are tests that rely on a qualitative evaluation based on existing criteria. Those test results may vary between testers who understand the criteria. Examples include evaluating the quality and applicability of certain properties of content. So I see a comment here, when WCAG 3 started, I remember an idea that WCAG 2.x conforming sites would automatically get a bronze in the transition process. So I'll explain that a little later. The different standards, the different conformance models actually address this slightly differently. So it might actually get you closer to silver in some ones, you know, as long as you don't have any critical errors or anything that would really obstruct a user from using your site or your content, you know, which generally, if you follow WCAG 2.x, that is true, though it might not be in all the cases, for instance. So there may be a critical error that hasn't been previously defined that you would need to fix in order to get to Silva, for instance. So then moving on to test requirements, this is also exploratory content. We have 4 test requirement types currently. First is prescriptive requirements. These are, you know, basically define how to conform, and how to test for conformance is predetermined. So it's very computational in nature. If there's more than one option, all options are defined by the standard. So it's something that's already sort of very, you know, clearly written out in the standards. Then you have what's called adaptive requirements. And so just to back up, you know, the reason why we have these different requirements is that it's really to address the issue that content may satisfy all outcomes using computational and qualitative tests, but that content might not be usable still to people with a wide variety of disabilities. So these 4 different test requirements are meant to help address that issue and include a wider range of user needs and evaluate more of the user experience. So adaptive requirements include in the testing process variations where the results rely on external or user-specific content, context in which the content is being tested. So you have to look at the context of the content in order to determine whether or not it meets the standard. These tests are still computational or qualitative tests, but context typically dictates what results are expected and which tests are relevant to the situation. And then you have what's called extensible requirements. So these requirements rely on selecting multiple valid ways to measure the outcome. So for instance, a little known fact, there are actually multiple ways that are accepted out there for measuring relative luminance. So that's color contrast. Testers will need to determine which is most valid for their use case. So you can use any of the accepted methods available, and those would be defined in the standard. Then you have what's called protocol-based requirements. So these are using accepted industry protocols that meet defined quality criteria. So for instance, you know, if you were to adopt a plain language protocol that you're going for English, that you're going to make content, you know, you're going to use clearly written plain language content in English, you'd use a protocol that defines that and what that is, and use that and apply it to your content, and then validate that you've tested the quality of that outcome. So it allows for outside guidance to be used to help meet conformance outcome. So if the requirement is to use clear words and to make something readable to folks, then you could use outside plain language guidance that's specific for the language in order to meet that. I just wonder if there's an example where WCAG 3.0, to read David's question, I wonder if there's an example where WCAG 3.0 and would not be addressed in WCAG 2.x. So there are going to be guidelines that are in WCAG 3.0 that are not going to be in WCAG 2.x. For instance, clear words is a new guideline. So you do have a guideline for readable content that's currently in AAA. But WCAG 3.0 actually has a requirement that you avoid ambiguous terms and you define them to make the content more accessible to people. An adaptive requirement would be, actually, I can pull that document up here after we get through the presentation. There's a couple of examples out there. I just can't think of one off the top of my head. They're currently actually being written now as methods, and folks are choosing different ones that would different candidate success criteria from 2.0 to actually rewrite as methods in 3.0, but still kind of being built out. So I'm just saying that that's in flux, but I can pull up an example here in just a minute. We have a few more slides to get through, but I'll do that afterward. So there are scoring model proposals that are under discussion, and these aren't even in the first public working draft or the editor's draft. So they're brand new. They're out there in our minutes. You can find them, but I think this is the first time it's being talked about in a public forum like this. So the first, so these different test types and requirements would form the framework for methods, which are the tests in WCAG 3, and will often be fit into what's known as a conformance model, which will provide a framework for grading whether or not outcomes have been met. There are currently 6 proposals out there, and more than likely, it's more than likely that future conformance model proposals will have pieces of each of these in there, but not actually be any one of these. So these are all ideas that might fit into the final conformance standard or a more final conformance standard. So here's a breakdown. The first one is outcome-centered conformance. So that one proposed that all testing evaluations be pass and fail at the bronze level. And then silver and gold conformance is determined by outcome and aggregated for overall conformance. And then you have tests and assertions, which includes testable requirements, adjectival ratings, recommendations, and protocols for authoring processes. So at the bronze level, all tests have to pass in order to get that level. And then silver and gold are based on percentages of adjectival ratings, recommendations, and protocols. Then you have option 3, which is adjectival tests, which tests are rated against an adjectival scale, and overall conformance is based on all tests reaching a particular level in that scale. And then you have badges, which is a neat idea. So that's test quality evaluations and additions. So bronze has tests, silver is quality evaluations, so a little more subjective than just tests, and then gold is additional outcomes and methods that will be defined in later standards. And then 5 is required and optimized. So that's methods within a certain outcome are required and optimized. So bronze has all the required ones, silver has bronze plus some optimized, and gold is all everything required and optimized. So yeah, that probably was clear as mud, right? They're working on making that a bit more accessible, but the whole idea behind the new conformance model is to make it an easier barrier of entry for folks so that not everything is just completely pass and fail. And this is where we need this is where we need your input. How do you make this easy to understand and actually easy to practically implement? So what I would do is I take a look at our current editor's draft, and please make recommendations. Definitely need your input as folks who don't write standards all day every day. So let's go over how you can prepare your team for the new standards. So first of all, everything we covered today is going to change. I have to add that as a caveat. It's not going to stay the same, especially if you provide input. So the best way to prepare for any new standard is to either create an accessibility program if you don't have one, or move your program that you already have along what's called the maturity path. So make it a more mature program. As part of this process, and just in general, the W3C has a huge library of resources which you can use to grow your accessibility program. The first one which we have here is the WCAG maturity model. which can help you assess where your program is and how to create a more mature program. Then you have WCAG 2 ICT. So that's information communications technology. There is an existing document out there on this, like how to apply it to mobile apps and such, but the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group is updating it soon. It's in our new charter, and hopefully it'll provide guidance about how organizations can make WCAG apply to other kinds of information technology. Then you have, accessibility conformance testing guidance, which is expected to come from the ACT, that's the group that's making testable guidance on how to test all of this, and depends on where the group lands on the new conformance model. But there should be more guidance being released soon. Yeah, that's definitely there's a comment here that says, I wonder how to make VR apps accessible. There's a lot of conversation happening about that right now. Yes, I will be providing the slide deck afterward, and I'll have all of these different links. I'll just put in one in the chat here for the maturity model, which is great. I recommend everybody look at that one. Also, the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group has been periodically releasing supplemental guidance, which you can use to help create better content for users. So one that I think everybody should take a look at is the Making Content Usable guidance, which I'll just paste into the chat as well. As I mentioned before, WCAG just generally releases great guidance all the time, and it definitely is hard to find sometimes, but anything you could ever want to learn about creating the very best experiences for users is really just at your fingertips. So I have some of the guidance. This is not all of it, but I have some of it here. So I have a comment here. I think my question for conformance is, how well do any of these approaches work with bad organizations who don't want to be accessible? If you don't want to be accessible, I guess you just won't be. But I don't think most organizations don't want to be accessible. I think that they're having trouble seeing how they can be accessible, and how they can do it in a way that's practical. Folks who are leaders in organizations have to balance a lot of competing priorities, and you have to show them why accessibility is important, more important in some cases than cybersecurity. And when you draw that connection, accessibility actually is security. You can't have a secure application without it being accessible, for instance. So you want to think outside the box and not just think about compliance, because all compliance is a box. And organizations may seek then to just check the box, but there are other benefits like security benefits and business benefits. People with disabilities represent a $490 billion market, for instance, and with 97 or 98% of the websites out there having at least one WCAG finding, you stand a good chance when you offer an accessible product to opening your business up to a whole community of users that will buy your product. So there's also the diversity, equity, and inclusion, line you can draw as well. Everyone, wants to create the very best experiences that reach everybody, and everybody wants to include everybody. So there's also that connection as well. And it's something that's important to employees and the people who will be buying your products just generally. You don't want to exclude anybody. Nobody wants to exclude people. Yeah, I can send some links to some resources, after we get through the slide deck. And the W3C actually has a business case that you can cite as well. So you have the Web Accessibility Initiative page, which is chock full of resources and tutorials and such to actually just learn how you can start complying and creating content that meets the standards. And train your team. That's an important deal. Then you have webinar guidance. So there is remote meeting guidance that the W3C just released on how to run an accessible meeting, which is incredible. I think everybody should read it and everybody should apply it. Then you have ARIA authoring practices, which are new and improved. They've made it a lot easier. I'm on the ARIA working group as well, and they've just made it a lot easier to actually access the authoring practices guide. So instead of having to read through a whole huge standard, you can actually just go and check on the type of component you're looking at and actually see samples. Then you also have ARIA to HTML. So if you're interested in trying to wrap your head around how ARIA maps to native HTML, and if anyone's familiar with the accessibility community, the first rule of ARIA, it's sort of like Fight Club. You don't use ARIA if you can avoid it. So I guess not quite the same, but it provides a lot of great info and can help you make that connection. Then you have personalization. So there's this cool new idea out there about making content that will actually adapt to a user's preferred view. So it's called WAI Adapt. And basically, it will allow authors to specify the important types of content and the important parts of their content, so that folks can actually reduce content to only the most important information, and use things like reading aids like iconography and such to highlight or interpret important text. So that'll be really a game changer for the folks in the space where they find iconography and other elements like that helpful to understanding. So it'll personalize the web for everybody. And let me see if let me just copy this from the presentation and just paste this all in so you have all these resources. And, oh, oops, there we are. So here's how you can prepare from a very, very practical level. First of all, start a program if you don't have one. Many companies have projects or specific people rather than programs. So to prepare yourself for the future, you'll need a fully funded and staffed and empowered team. So it takes time to build that within an organization. So it's important to get started now. Then second, get leadership support. This can take time. So educating your leadership now, not only on the compliance piece, but as we talked about the business piece, security, and other user benefits accessibility brings, like accessible development is just good development. It relies heavily on semantic structure and meaning, and actually educating your developers help them understand the language that they're working with. A lot of developers learn, to if the code works, it's okay, but it's not true because it doesn't actually follow the rules that are within that language that they're programming in. Then train your teams. You need to build accessibility into your software development or content creation life cycles. You need everybody in your team empowered and to understand their role. I actually just did a talk on that, how to create an accessibility enterprise training program. So if you have any questions about that, I can help you with that. Also, just leverage the wealth of resources provided by the W3C. Anything that you've ever wanted to know about digital accessibility is on their site. It might be hard to find, but it's there. Oh, oops. So I just want to leave you some final thoughts. Just one of the goals of the new standards is to make it easier for organizations to start moving towards conformance. And it will reward organizations that move their programs further along the maturity curve and become trailblazers. And if you see that it's not doing that, please provide input and provide suggestions about how we can improve. The best way to prepare is to create an organizational structure that will allow you to conform with WCAG 2.x and incorporate the most recent W3C guidance as it's issued. Also, don't narrow the scope. Think about ways to make all of your digital content accessible. This won't only help your users, make it easier to stay compliant with the new standards as they're released. Also, educate your team. Training is very important to this process. If you can't get the attention of your leaders, then start with your teammates. Every person in your organization contributes to its culture. And if you get a lot of champions, you can really change a whole organization's culture. And finally, thank you for all that you do to make the internet more accessible. So I know it may not feel like it sometimes, but everything you're doing does make a difference, and every step closer is a win for everybody. And it's going to take every one of us working together to create a world wide web that reaches everyone equally. So one that's finally accessible and equitable. And yeah, so here's my contact info. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to answer any questions, send over resources, strategize. There's a whole community out there that's out here to help. So now, just if we have, I know we've gotten a couple of questions as we've gone through the presentation. I just want to make sure that I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can pull up some of these things that people have asked to see. So first, I'll pull up the first public working draft to show the rubric. Okay, so let me pull this up here. All right, so this is an example of one of the rubrics that for organized content. This is part of 1.3.1 that was moved from WCAG 2.x to WCAG 3.0, and it dealt with heading structure, which wasn't necessarily as called out in the WCAG 2.0 guidelines. So this is updated a little bit. So you have different ratings here, based on the level of conformance that content meets. This is just rating what percentage of the headings actually, are present and describe the content. And also, if anything, it will fail if there are critical errors in the process, and critical errors are those, things that would prevent a user from using your application at all. So they want to make sure that in this, that there are no critical errors, and that your headings do a certain percentage of your headings do meet the standard of actually providing a logical structure to your content. Okay, and then we had another question here. And let's see here. Sorry, I was just going back and looking. Oh, adaptive requirement. Yes, let me pull that up. Okay, so I have that here. Let me just pull this up. This is a draft document, so there's going to be comments in it. So down here, aggregate types of tests. Here. So examples might be, individuals might require different kinds of contrasts, including both high and low contrasts. So it basically, when testing for variations in users, the actual numbers for each experience may vary based on the adaptive requirements. So if you have some users who need really high contrast content, it might not be sufficient for you to meet the contrast standards that are in, are in the current standards, which are 4:5:1. You might need to meet a 7:1 ratio, for instance. Or if you have the same interface, and this might be a little bit more of a real life example that's translated into more than one language with different grammar rules, you might have different conformance requirements for each language. Like, for example, if you have a language that uses different writing systems, you might use simpler ways to word things so that's more accessible to a wider range of users in that language. And then also, things like clear words will be different in each language that you're translating content into, because different even different localities use different kinds of language, and things may be clearer in one context or one country than another. Does that shed a little bit more light there? Okay.
Wow, that was fantastic, Juanita. That's great.
Any other questions or?
Yeah, feel free to come off mute and chime in, folks, if you want to talk about anything and ask any questions.
So I put a question out there. This was awesome. First of all, you did a great job, and it was really, really interesting. And I just find that it's a big lift for small businesses like myself to do a good job with accessibility. I would love to do everything we could do, but I mean, it's everything we can do to just make it happen as much as we can. And half that battle is educating our customers. And when we spend all that time doing that, we got nothing left, right? So it's like we have to rely on the Drupal community to be able to do a lot of things with core and contrib to be able to meet these accessibility requirements and the things that are out there. And how do you really scale that and make it easier for a small organization or a small business or a nonprofit that's really stretching things to the limit already? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think there have been different proposals in the past, like having requirements be a little less stringent for smaller organizations in some cases, or, but that might not be the answer. Tooling might have to come to support that. Things that guide people in creating accessible content, things that we currently don't have in our repertoire, that really don't make accessibility an afterthought, but help somebody bake it into the process. And I think that there's a lot of people working on this problem, and we'll get to something, whether it's materials that will help, or platforms that allow people to create accessible content more easily. I do think that there's a bright future there when it comes to this, that will help folks become compliant. I just think that there's a lot of it's a challenging problem to solve for sure.
Yeah, and I see a lot of improvements. It's getting much easier, but it's still a heavy lift. So
Definitely. I mean, but just think about the long way we've gone from just even a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that everybody's working on this as hard as they are, because they really are.
Yeah, these aren't easy problems to solve, I think. They're problems that take, I think, nuance and really careful thought. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions?
I'll just follow on to the Drupal community is particularly lucky in where we are with accessibility. We've had two really good leads in accessibility. We have Mike Gifford, and previous to Mike, gosh, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. We had two really good leads who pushed first Drupal 7 and then Drupal 8 in accessibility. And we've got accessibility not just on the front end, but on a lot of the back end as well. And there are problems and there are issues, and there's a lot of issues with the contrib modules. But we're in a much better position than many other CMSs and some of the frameworks as well, to be perfectly honest. Because we started a long time ago, we started on Drupal 7 and we're just getting better. It'll be interesting to see where we are on Drupal 10 when it comes out in Christmas.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's definitely a process. So maybe WCAG can look into, so the W3C can look into grants for small businesses and nonprofits to apply to start their accessibility programs, or maybe support from Drupal and the open source community. So there is the Global Accessibility Awareness Day initiative, where folks that create frameworks or open source platforms and such could take a pledge to make their applications accessible. That's currently a lot of organizations are doing that right now. The idea of grants is interesting, and I think it's a good idea. Definitely some sort of incentive to, fund those programs that really, because really accessibility is really essential at the end of the day. Oh, no worries. It's alphabet soup. All these acronyms are alphabet soup.
I don't think we're going to get people really jumping on it until it becomes a hard and fast requirement. Like if you think about GDPR, I mean, there's a penalty to pay. And so when people start realizing when that starts heading their way, all of a sudden it'll get pushed to the, hate to say it, but I mean, I think that's what's going to take sometimes to push it to a priority. And that will put a strain on some businesses. Like I said, a lot of nonprofits barely have a web team. So to try to add that that extra requirement, it's going to take a lot. And if there was a outsource, I mean, that's a really good business model, is to be an outsourced program manager for accessibility for small, kind of like what Canopy offers, for the support with accessibility in our sites as they work on them. But I can see it going that way.
Like provide that education and training and such. That makes sense.
Or just like, I will be your outsourced, like if we have a external dev support, we might have an external accessibility program support, or I can hire somebody and then they manage my accessibility. And then, like in our organization, we have our websites, which is one thing, but we do a lot of things remotely. So the information that you showed about the remote accessibility standards, now that's something I've already shared with our team, because that's very important. We're a global organization. So there's a lot of different ways. And then also, as we rebrand, what are our colors, how, so we do a lot of print, we do a lot of web, we do a lot of online things, training, so it would make sense to have an internal accessibility staff, but I know that's not going to happen. So
yeah, there are organizations that provide services like that, though it's probably better to spend your dollars to have them train your staff. Because the thing is, if you make accessibility an afterthought, the problem is you're going to have to retrofit your applications to be accessible or your content. And that's much more costly than to just bake it right in from the beginning. Or you pay that person to be a coach to make sure that everybody's doing everything at every phase of the process the proper way.
Yeah, that's I think will be part of it. But for instance, like when we do our website, I have content editors, and content editors are also team managers for other work, but they also update their part of the website. They only get on the website maybe 5% of their job. So all the training and coaching I do helps for them do the content entry when I teach them, but they're not going to get on there again for another 3 or 4 months. So then, and that's only 5%. So it would be good just to put the bug in the ear, but yeah, I think it would be a lot to expect everybody to always be on top of accessibility as a priority, which doesn't negate the importance of it. It just tucks to the reality of small teams and stretched out people.
Sometimes so when you actually bake accessibility in and train your folks, it's actually, it adds only about like 5% to a person's time generally. And you know, it becomes sort of second nature. So for a content author, for instance, a lot of the things that you would do to make something accessible are just good writing practices. You know, don't use jargon, break up large blocks of content to bullets, you know, define abbreviations the first time you use them in a paragraph. So those are things that make your content accessible. But at the same time also, you know, are just things that writers would do normally. For developers, you know, just coding things using the semantics of HTML, you know, gets you a very good portion of the way there. It's when you talk about custom components and such, you have to remember a few more things, but you can make it second nature. It's just, it takes a little bit of practice. And so I'm a little bit of an optimist there.
A lawyer that's an optimist, really?
And there are currently legal requirements around it, depending on which country or jurisdiction you're talking about. A lot of them in the US are enshrined in, this is not legal advice, by the way, but they are enshrined in court cases and such under Title III of the ADA. And you can find that online in a lot of places. And I'm happy to send you links. But there's actually a lot of talk about actually passing laws specific to, it's in the US, specific to digital accessibility. And you do have laws, you know, they're going to come into effect for private businesses in the EU. So if you do business in the EU, it's definitely something to pay attention to, you know, because you did have, I think, was it the directive that came out recently? So I don't know if that's gone into effect yet or not, but it's, yeah, there are, the legal requirements will just get stricter, I think, in the coming years.
I'm going to go ahead and just stop recording, but we can continue to talk.
Oh yeah, sorry. I can talk forever about this.